Now, I think we've covered most of the important facts on what a child should know about sex by the time he starts the first grade. There is one more, though, that no one has mentioned, and that's women's breasts.
We live in the most breast-happy country in the whole world. Our children are learning a great deal about women's breasts from the time they can hardly open their eyes. This topless business, the bathing suits, the low-cut gowns, everything has a message about women's breast, and it's very clear, and it comes across loud and clear to the children. Breasts are for fun. That's all. Huh? Well, now, it doesn't take a doctor to figure out that a breast does have another function, and that is for feeding babies. And yet, there is so little of this done in our culture today, and such an onrush of the propaganda of sexual stimulus relating about breasts, that this other is forgotten. And we can mouth this if we wish. Oh yes, you should respect a girl's breasts. A woman's breasts are private property. They're part of marriage. And we can say all these things. And yet, if we act differently, they will act differently. We would suggest, in terms of sex education, if we feel that deep petting and sexual stimulus up to the point of intercourse, as well as intercourse itself, is something that should really be reserved for marriage. And when we're talking about women's breasts in petting, we do exactly mean that. There's only one way that we can really effectively teach our children the value and the dignity, if you wish, and the beauty in the fullest sense of the word of woman's breast, and that is to breastfeed again. There's nothing stimulating about seeing a woman nurse a child. A man is not erotically aroused by this. Rather, there's something wonderful within a man to see his wife nurse. It makes him so much more of a man, as he now stands in the protecting, totally masculine sense over this totally feminine, somewhat helpless now, mother and babe. And some of our customs of even when mother does nurse a baby and the baby's hungry at mealtime to go in the bedroom to nurse and leave the lunch table is so ridiculous and unfortunate. Are you ashamed to eat in public? What's shameful about giving a babe the milk that God put there? Feed the baby at the dinner table. And if we have company, so much the better. And so your clergyman's there for supper. Feed the baby at the dinner table. Well, don't go around feeding on the bus or in the ballpark, but in the expanded family, in your bridge club even, and your baby is here and you're nursing and the baby is time to eat. You eat in front of others, don't you? Let's nurse again. For all of the marvelous medical reasons that we could enumerate, the allergy reasons and the psychological benefits that we now know exist, but also for the fact of sex education. Let's breastfeed in front of our children.
And then as our children begin to grow, we reach those pre-adolescent years and we arrive at the time for the first heart-to-heart talk. For the mother now, her daughter will menstruate, the first girl in a class will menstruate at age 9. And surely the first one in her little gang of girls will menstruate by 10. So take your daughter aside by age 9, or at the very latest by age 10, and give her a very brief, sketchy outline of menstruation. Maybe she's just straight up and down, but you want to get 2 points across to her. This is a normal process that occurs to all women, and mother knows about it. So you can come to me and ask me questions. Then when she's beginning to develop herself a little further along, talk to her again. Give her more detail on what the menstruation is. The emphasis is on it's normal. We'll talk about it, show her where the sanitary belts and Kotex and so are, and give her this feeling of a personal bond of woman-to-woman talk. Now, when you've told her what you want her to know, you might give her a little booklet to read, such as World of a Girl or It's Great to Be Growing Up. Now, these books are not in place of what you tell her. They are in addition to what you tell her.
Now, the pre-adolescent boy is talked to by his father, or should be. Again, in our culture, mother has done most of this, and we think that this is rather unfortunate. After all, this is the story of manhood, and Mother really can't tell it as well. If she's a widow or living without a husband, that's another story. But if there's a daddy in the house or Uncle John next door, then ideally, this is a man-to-man talk, the first man-to-man talk. And here again, the boy, 2 years later than his sister, Dad takes him aside, and we talk about the changes in the boy's body. You enumerate what's going on. His penis is lengthening, his scrotal sac. He'll be having erections, and now the story of the wet dream. Now, tell it in any way you want, and if you don't know the technical words, that doesn't make any difference. You're telling him what you know this to be. And you simply tell him the wet dream is normal, he will be having it, this is the seed that he's known about, and that he is not married, and therefore this is an overflow of the excess seed, and that's all there is to it. And what of masturbation? This is something highly charged with individual opinions and religious pros and cons. It's something we've terribly messed up in the past. And we would tell each of you now to teach your own moral code on this, by all means. But let's, for heaven's sakes, not teach an overabundance of guilt. If we teach a lad that he'll go insane or be impotent because he masturbates, and then he masturbates, and he's still not impotent, then he knows we've lied. And so he disregards everything else we've told him. We can teach a code of right or wrong, if we so believe on this, without setting too impossible a goal of perfection. We have to remember that almost universally teenage boys will masturbate, at times or frequently. And if we tell them it is absolutely wrong and you're worthless if you do, then we crush this lad when he fails. Give him a goal if you wish, by all means. Don't speak in terms of you will be, but say many boys do this, or even most boys do this. But what we try to do is save this. This is important. The immature lad does this. The boy who has a certain amount of self-pity. And when you're grown and a real man, then you'll be able better to control this and save this valuable part of you for your wife and so forth. Give him a definite goal if you see such. Teach your moral code, but don't overload it. Okay, here's a good book, A Boy Today, A Man Tomorrow, to help Dad prepare to do the job that he should do for his boy. Now, these were the heart-to-heart talks. Okay. Originally then, it's asked and answered in a group. Pre-adolescent, it's mother-daughter, father-son in the heart-to-heart talk, or one or two or three of these. But now our children go beyond that into the years when they date and they relate to the opposite sex. And now they are young adults. And now who talks? Whoever is asked. Now it's son to either mother or dad. It's daughter to either mother or dad. Whoever this child now can relate to and come to. This is the one, and we do hope they'll be coming to us yet, because now they have really important questions.
For example, maybe you want your dating children to understand how the difference of reaction between boys and girls would be. Tell your daughter very simply, honey, for most women it's nice to be cuddled and hugged and loved, but not too much of this for most boys can be a plain sexual arousal. Remember that you're tuned different, and for you, if the more you cuddle and snuggle, maybe he thinks this is encouragement for him. Understand what the differences are, and let them know that each one bears a real responsibility toward the person who they go out with if they really love them and want the best for them.
And don't hesitate for a minute as a dad to talk to your daughter. You know, if Dad would mean to tell his daughter that he thinks that she should wait till marriage for sex and be convinced of this, how would she find out? Well, she'd read it in books. She might find it out from church, from school. And these have their value, and they're good enough for most. But think of the impact if Dad would take his daughter aside and tell her that he thinks it's wise for her to wait. That your mother and I believe sincerely that you will be happier in your marriage if you wait. And give the reasons, not just the moral reasons, although these are important for you or you, but the psychological reasons of happiness later on. He who strays around before marriage is the one who finds it easier to play around outside of marriage. This business of experience and learning is not necessarily a good precursor toward marriage, because this is an act of love between just you two. And how anybody else does it or how you did it with someone else doesn't relate. It's how you two in your lifetime learned to blend your bodies totally, your minds and hearts, in this action of saying, I love you. But dad talk to daughter has an impact, I'm sure, 5 times as great as a clergyman saying the same thing. Okay, let's get on.
Our second question was, when should our children begin to date?
Actually dating, but boys would be like around 15.
All right.
Girls from 13 on, but some are like to.
All right, she's saying that there is a difference in maturity between boys. Now, she's mentioned maybe a 3-year gap. I think for sure there'd be at least a 2-year gap in maturing of the boys and the girls. She's saying they should not be pressured just because a group is doing something.
All right, that's
All right.
an opinion. Let's have another one.
All right, who else? What other group can add something? Next group, good. All right,
We think it's a good idea to get the boys and girls together at home or in church spaces for some well-chaperoned evening party.
Or what age did you say the parties would start? Did your group mention an age?
Probably junior high.
Junior high.
That would be about 7th grade.
Right.
You'd begin the family room or basement mixed party where there'd be dancing and so forth. Okay?
And I get generally arrive at about 16 as a single day age.
So by the
Junior.
time they're sophomores,
Right.
they'd be dating singly. All right? That's another opinion.
What other group can add more? All right? She's saying sock hops, maybe one for the 8th grader, and after that, into the freshman year for the sock
In other
hops.
words, she'd wait till 9th grade for that sort of activity.
All right.
She's, when are they starting to double date? What grade level? 9. All right. When should they begin double dating? 9th? Do y'all agree? 10? Or later? There's apparently a difference of opinion here too.
Depends on the maturity of the child. We will grant that there will be a year or 2 difference in maturing of each child, but for some guidelines, so you have something to base your judgment on, we'll try to set up some general goals, and then there'll be individual differences.
Because the parent, of course, makes this decision. They come to us, don't they, as parents, and they say, may I go to the sock hop, or can we go to the skating party, or can't I go to Susie's house to the slumber party? And you know what's happened? The children have gotten together beforehand. They're organized. And they're nailing us individually, aren't they? And so each of us as a parent is concerned about our teenager, and we want to do what's best for them.
But we're not always sure what is best for them, are we? Your opinions are typical of other communities around the country that have shown a 2 or 3 year difference in what age level you as individual parents think these various activities should begin. But before we comment on these, let's consider a couple of basic trends in our country today.
One is the age of marriage in our country, because this is very relevant. All through the history of our country, the average first marrying age for a woman had held at about age 22. Now, after World War II, women began marrying younger, and by the mid to late 50s, this figure had dropped till age 20. It has since dropped further, so that in some areas, in large cities at least, we see areas where the average first marriage for a girl is just a little over 18. And the boy has followed her down by 2 years. This has given us the earliest marrying age that we have ever had in the history of our nation. We are also the youngest marriers of any developed nation in the world. Okay, This has given us teenage marriages by the millions where we've never had them before. We could think of a clerk at a county seat in a small rural area who we know, who took his job right after World War II and in 1 year registered one 16-year-old girl for marriage, and last year he had 30-some 16-year-old girls for licenses. We are living with teenage marriages to an extent that we've never known it before. Now, is this good or is this bad? Let's look at them quickly from two directions. Number one, from the economic standpoint. Many teenage marriages occur because of a high school pregnancy. He marries her. They both drop off the educational ladder, join that dropout club, and what happens then? After a while, he loses his job at the filling station. She has her baby. He has no job, no diploma, no skill, and so he pulls unemployment compensation. You know that in our country, of all the men drawing unemployment checks, fully 1 out of 5 is age 20 or younger. We are spawning a vast pool of economically useless people. And if they're economically useless, they're going to be unfortunate, unhappy, and often delinquent marriages. You know that the very minimum today is a high school diploma, and hopefully something beyond that, and the further beyond that, the better. Our own Secretary of Labor, we've heard 3 times in the last year say, it used to be that if a man was unskilled but was willing to work and sweat, that he could support his family, however modestly. We have no use for him anymore. The machine is doing his work. He is unemployable, and so is she. Okay, so with the economics, what happens to the marriage itself? And here we really reap tragedy. Few of us know these figures. The U.S. Bureau of Census is quite simple and direct. It says that teenage marriages break up at a rate 3 times faster than the general divorce rate in the country. The general divorce rate in the country varies from 20 to almost 50% in some urban areas. Average is 20-25% around the country. 3 times that is 75%. And one of our greatest living anthropologists in a major study has come up with just this. 75% of the teenage marriages she studied ultimately divorced. She analyzed the remaining 25%. 15% were unhappy, but stuck it out because of children or family or religion or what have you. 10% were ultimately happy. 1 teenage marriage in 10 that could be considered a success. Now, many of us here are going to be called upon once or another time to counsel a teenage marriage, to give our permission, because ultimately we as parents must sign for an underage child, or to give our counsel as to whether or not this teenage couple should marry. And how will we counsel them? Well, the best we know, of course. Why do they want to marry? Well, you know, usually and often there's a pregnancy involved and he'll want to give the child a name, huh? Now that's a ridiculous reason for getting married for life, isn't it? To do right by the girl, or honor, his honor, or the parents' honor, or somebody's honor. There hadn't been much honor yet. Why start now? He's got to give the child a home, huh? A home. 1 chance in 10 of a lifetime secure, happy home, and we would let them marry to give that child a home. When, if we let this child be adopted through normal agency channels, it has a high 90% chance of a lifetime secure, happy home. If you really are concerned about the child, you commonly will not let them marry. She's pregnant. That's the big reason, of course. Pregnancy is no reason at all for a teenage marriage, period. None. Think of the child. And think of the other children to come. Why would we let these children marry? Because they often yet are that, we would look at these two young people and we would say, what chance does this have of success and of happiness? Can I look at these two youngsters and say, yes, I think they'll make it. I think they've got the moral stamina and the guts to follow through. They've got money behind them so they can finish their education. I think they love each other. Truly love. Not just passion, not just the moment, but deep concern for the welfare of their partner. If we can make a judgment as best we can that says, yes, I think they'll make it, all right, bless them, help them, let them marry. But if we can't make a reasonably sure judgment, we have no business letting them marry. Let them go off and live in sin for a while if they want to. Rather that than tying them down to a contract which might be irrevocable in their case. Again, think of the children. A marriage that may be good at 16, if she goes away to have the baby, is going to be a far more solid marriage at 17 or 18 if they're still talking to each other. We bear a deep responsibility for the integrity of marriages ahead. Let's be no part of these catastrophic teenage marriages unless we're mighty sure